Hi everyone, and welcome to this last reading of Morris Gleitzman's Boy Overboard. This is going to be the final instalment. I realised that we've only got a couple of days left of the term and we're up to chapter 35, and it just seemed crazy to not try and finish the book before the end of term. So I'm going to give it a bash and I'm going to try and read to the end. There are 7 chapters to go, but there's only 24 pages, so it shouldn't take too long, but it will. This one's going to be a longer episode than previous posts. So let's get straight into it, shall we? Chapter 35, page 156. We're in Australia. Almost. We're crowded into one of the warship's rubber boats speeding towards the coastline. Australia looks so green, except for the trippy brown palm trees and the grey buildings with the paint flaking off and the wooden jetty with plastic bags washed up against it. But the rest of it's really green. Some of the people in the boat are clutching each other and weeping. I don't blame them. Being here feels even better than I imagined. But there's one thing we haven't seen yet. Mum and Dad's boat. Bibi is next to me, almost in the water with excitement. Look, she yells, is that it there? She's pointing to a rusty shape at the edge of the bay. Omar peers at it. I admire his coolness. His parents are on that boat too. I bet he's boiling with excitement like me. No, says Omar. It's a storage tank. I go off the boil. He's right. I stare up and down the coastline, desperate to see Mum and Dad's boat. Jamal and Bibi, shouts Andrew from the front of our boat. Don't lean out so far. He's worse than Mum, mutters Bibi. I agree. Australians can be a bit overprotective. We're wearing life jackets and Bibi's holding a soccer ball. If we fall in, we're hardly going to sink. It's just my insides that are sinking. Mum and Dad's boat isn't here. Rashida can see how disappointed we are. Perhaps it landed in a different part of Australia, she says. Perhaps they're on a jetty waiting to meet you. Of course, that's it. Bibi and I lean out of the boat again and squint at the jetty. I can see quite a few people waiting for us to arrive. They're a bit hazy through the spray and sunlight. Any of them could be Mum or Dad. When we reach the jetty, Bibi and I are first off. Mum! We shout as we push through the people. Dad! Nobody replies. Most of the people on the jetty are wearing uniforms of one type or another. For a wild moment I hope that some kind Australian sailors have lent Mum and Dad their uniforms, but as I study the faces around me I see this hasn't happened. They're not here. Panic sweeps through me. My mind does all the things I've tried to stop it doing these last few days. Imagines Mum and Dad fighting pirates, dying of thirst, being swept away by a storm. I struggle to keep the panic and sadness inside me. Poor Bibi's already crying, and if I start now, everybody could end up distressed. Half the people on our boat have friends or family on the other boat, including Omar. Andrew comes over and puts his hand on my shoulder. We still haven't found the other boat, he says, but we will, I promise. I look up into his face, and what I see makes me feel calmer. Not the freckles or the red curly hair, the expression in his eyes. I can see that when Australians make a promise, they keep it. Cheer up, I say to Bibi. Everything's going to be okay. She doesn't look convinced. I am. As Andrew leads us off the jetty, I feel like running and shouting, scoring about 50 goals. This is Australia. I'm walking on an Australian pathway. Australian grass is growing nearby. Australian flies are landing on my face. I hug Bibi. Ah, we made it, I say. She hugs me back, gives a little smile through her tears. The grass looks good for soccer, she says. Rashida and Omar catch up with us. Rashida's lips look even greener here in Australia. They're definitely trembling more. She puts her arms round me and Bibi and Omar and squeezes us tight. Thank you, she whispers. I thank her back and remind her that if she hadn't kept us alive with her flower, we wouldn't have been around to help her with the pirates. Neither would I, says Omar, unless I could have scabbed some food from someone else. Okay, everyone, says Andrew when the other people from the boat have caught up with us. Welcome to your new home. He leads us into a dusty compound. In it are two of the biggest tents I've ever seen. Canvas tents with proper ropes and everything. Inside the tents, Australian servicemen and women are laying out the folding beds from the warship in neat rows. Males in that one, says Andrew. Females in that one. I freeze. I feel Bibby freeze next to me. I don't even have to look at her to know what she's thinking. No, I say to Andrew. We're staying together. Rashida grabs a startled Omar's hand. So are we, she says. Andrew sighs. He looks at the four of us. Okay, he says. Just until your folks get here. I inspect our tent. It's perfect. It's near the jetty, so we'll be able to hear when the other boat arrives, and it'll be great for us all to have somewhere to stay while Mum and Dad are looking for jobs before we find a house of our own. Bibby is still looking sad. I have an idea, a way to keep her mind off things. Hey, I say to her and the others, let's explore. Let's go and see all the things Andrew's been telling us about. Shopping centres with fountains, cinemas with 14 movies showing at once. Let's go and find an Australian supermarket. Bibby is interested. The others are too. Then I noticed Andrew is giving me a strange look, and I realise why. I'm being really selfish. Mum and Dad and Omar's parents aren't even here yet. At this very minute they could be sitting shipwrecked on a remote island waiting to be rescued. It'd be pretty mean rushing off and seeing the sights without them. I give Andrew a grateful look. Thank goodness Australians are so good at thinking of others. It's what's interesting here is that they have been put into a situation where they've got temporary housing, and if you remember when they first became refugees in what we can guess would be a neighbouring country like Pakistan, they were sheltering under Dad's coat on a stick, if you remember. So a tent with a stretcher bed, set up. It's perfect. It's so great, and they're letting them stay together as a family unit, which is pretty nice. There was a bit that oh gosh, that's why I had a pencil last time so I could write down what it was that I wanted to talk to you about. So the other boat hasn't arrived and all of that sort of stuff. It'll come back to me. I'll have to do it. Pencil in hand. Here we go. Chapter 36, page 161. Bibby kicks the ball to me. Good pass. I sidestep a tackle from an Australian sailor and pass to Omar. He shoots. Our supporters cheer. It's a good effort, but a bit hopeful from 40 metres out. Their goalkeeper runs out and picks up the ball where it stopped. Good attempt, Omar, I say. This is a great idea of Andrew's. A soccer match to keep us occupied while we wait for the other boat to arrive. Refugees versus Aussies. I'm having a great time. Bibby is too. Playing with teams is even better than one-a-side, and it's fantastic having a crowd watching. All the people from our boat are here. Even though the warship has gone back out to sea, there are still loads of Aussies cheering their team. So if the warship's left, where are they? And if the warship's left, how long have they been where they are? Omar doesn't seem to be having such a great time. For some reason, he's looking even gloomier than usual. Perhaps it's because he's not very good at soccer. Jamal, he says, have you heard what people are saying? Poor kid. He must have heard our supporters criticising his shot. Don't worry, I say to him. I wasn't very good at first either. Now we're in Australia, you'll have plenty of chance to practice. Not that, says Omar. What they're saying about this camp. I can't concentrate on camp gossip. The other team has just scored again, 6-0. These Aussies are so good it's hard to believe they've never played together before today. Andrew reckons they didn't even have a soccer ball before I arrived, which is weird. Why didn't they just go to a supermarket and buy one? Jamal, Omar is saying, are you listening to me? No, I say, I'm not. If you want to win at soccer, you've got to concentrate on the game. You don't see Manchester United gossiping during matches. I know I'm a bit tough, but if Omar wants to improve, he's got to understand the basics. I hurry back to the centre of the pitch. Jamal and Bibby, says Rashida as we kick off again. Run up their end and I'll try and get the ball to you. She means play deep striker. Me too, says Omar. Bibby's off like a rocket. I can hardly keep up with her. Not only can she kick harder than me, I think she can run faster than me. I'll have to train hard if she might, or she might get a place with Dubbo Abattoirs United and I won't. Oh, wow, Rashida's done it. The ball's flying towards me. I trap it on my chest and turn towards goal. Oh, my hip hurts. Two Aussie defenders on me. Watch this, Sir Alex. I saw David Beckham do this once, and I bet you he told him about it. Two defenders go between them, get them confused. Yes, it works. And because Aussies are so decent, neither of them fouls me. I pass to Bibby, who's in a great shooting position. Do a scud shot. Do a scud shot, Bibby. Oh no, an Aussie defender's blocking her. She's not sure what to do. She passes back to me. I can hear my two Aussie defenders thudding towards me. Pass! Screams Omar. Shoot! Screams Bibby. I hesitate. Then shoot. A flash of pain sears out from my hip, but I don't care. The goalie doesn't even move. The ball's like a missile, flashing between the posts, over the crowd and slamming into the compound fence. I fling my arms into the air. Goal! Yells Bibby joyfully. Our supporters will love this. Nothing like a goal to cheer you up after a long, dangerous journey and years of persecution by a vicious and unforgiving government. Except there's no cheering, just silence. Our supporters are just standing there stunned. Some aren't even paying attention. They're having conversations. Was I offside? Has the referee not allowed the goal? Bibby looks as confused as me. The referee blows his whistle and points to the centre spot. It is a goal. Our supporters are making noise now, but they're not cheering. They're wailing and screaming and sobbing. What is going on? People are running onto the pitch, throwing their arms around players, weeping. My arms are still in the air, and I feel the blood running out of them. Is this something to do with what Omar was saying? Something to do with the camp? Then I hear what the people around me are saying, and I feel the blood run out of my heart. News has come in about the other boat, Mum and Dad's boat. It's sunk. Chapter 37. I look wildly around the pitch for Andrew. We have to get a rescue boat launched. I can't see him among all the weeping, howling people, and then I remember he's out on the warship. A group of Australian sailors are leaning against the fence smoking, just past where Bibby is sprawled, sobbing on the grass. I sprint over to them, waving my arms. Quick, I yell. We have to get a boat launched to go and help search for survivors. The Australian sailors look at me. Now, I scream, before it's too late. There are people in the ocean. My dad can't swim. The Australian sailors look at each other. One of them says something to me that I can't understand and waves me away. I don't believe it. Then I realise what's happening. They can't speak my language. They don't understand. I grab a stick and draw frantically in the dust. A sinking fishing boat, a warship, doing all it can. More people in the water than the warship can cope with, including Mum and Dad. The Australian sailors stare at my drawing. This is unbelievable. One of them is actually smirking. Don't you care? I scream at them. Don't you care that my parents are drowning? I can't believe it. I can't believe that people can be like this in Australia. One of the sailors stares at me. Australia, he says. He takes the stick from me and draws in the dust. A big island. Then he draws a long way away from it, a small island. He points to the big island. Australia, he says. The smirking sailor smirks even more. The sailor with the stick points to the small island and gestures around at the soccer pitch and the tents in the harbour. Here, he says, not Australia. Chapter 38. Jamal! Rashida's voice soft in the gloom of the tent. I don't look up. I keep my face pushed into my damp pillow and my arms wrapped tightly around Bibby. Jamal, Bibby, I brought you some dinner. It's your favourite, fish fingers, chips and peas. Go away, sobs Bibby. I don't answer. I don't want food. I don't want Rashida. I don't want Australia. I just want Mum and Dad. I spoke to the radio operator here, says Rashida, her voice trembling. The warship did everything they could. After they picked up the 3 young survivors, they searched for hours. They did try. It doesn't help. I keep thinking that if we'd kept the candlestick, Mum and Dad could have lit a candle and the rescuers might have seen them both before they slid down into the depths. Which is a stupid thought, because if Mum hadn't sold the candlestick, we'd still be in the refugee camp or a government jail. I wish we were, instead of Mum and Dad at the bottom of the sea, and me and Bibby on an island thousands of kilometres from Australia. I feel Rashida pushing something into my hand, something flat. It's your, it's your soccer ball, she says sadly. When you scored your big goal, it got punctured on the barbed wire. I don't care. Rashida doesn't say anything for a long time. There's just the sound of Bibby and the other people in the tent sobbing. I hold Bibby tight. I hear Rashida take a deep breath. When she speaks, her voice is shaking. Jamal and Bibby, I just want you to know that you've still got me. I know it's not the same, but you have. Thanks, I mumble into my pillow. Feels a tiny bit better, her saying that, but only in the way that the last part of drowning feels better. You still know it's the end, even if you think you can see Australia. For some reason, this thought makes me cry even harder. When I've finished, Rashida has gone. It's just me and Bibby. Chapter 39. Bibby's asleep at last. That's why I'm lying out here on the soccer pitch, so I don't disturb her while I try and plan our future. It's hard to plan quietly when you're crying. I don't want to think about the future. I don't want to think at all, but somebody's got to do it, and Bibby's only 10. Jamal. A voice out of the darkness. Even though the moon's bright, I can't see anyone. Jamal. It's Omar's voice, wobbly and uncertain. It's not like Omar. Then I remember his parents were on the boat too. I'd forgotten that. Grief can make you really selfish. Over here, I call to him. He comes and sprawls next to me. I've got to tell you something. I've got something to tell you, he says. My first thought is that I don't want to hear. The last piece of news Omar told me here on the soccer pitch was bad enough, or would have been if I'd listened. In fact, everything people have told me lately has been terrible except for Andrew, but he's a liar. Then I remember Omar is grieving too. What is it? I say. They weren't on the boat, he says. I roll over and stare at him. Who? I say. He looks at the ground. My parents, he says. They died when I was 2. Neither of us say anything for ages. How did you get your ticket to Australia? I asked. I didn't, he says. I hung around a big family in the camp, and when they got on buses, so did I, and people thought I was with them. What about the plane? I asked. Same thing, I hid in the toilet. I'm sorry I lied to you, Jamal. Slowly I take this in. Here's a kid with no parents, who doesn't let it hold him back, who goes out and does things like travel to Australia without a ticket. Neither of us says anything for another long time. I stare at the stars and think about what me and Bibby could go out and do. We could travel around Australia talking to players whose teams have just lost matches. When we tell them what's happened to us and they see our tears, things won't seem so bad for them. In return, they might let us train with them. Omar is fidgeting. I can see he's got something else on his mind. Don't ask me about my parents, he said suddenly, because I don't know anything about them, but I do know about my ancestors. Tell me about them, I say. They were thieves, says Omar. One of them had his hands chopped off. I remember Omar trying to steal my soccer ball. I also remember him saving it from the harbour and clinging on to Bibby, saving her from attacking the pirate. Omar might think he's a thief, but it's never that simple. I give him a look to show him I know. What about your ancestors, says Omar. Well, one lot were desert warriors, I say. The other lot were bakers. Which are you, says Omar. I think about this. I think about the things that have happened. My chest fills with grief again, because suddenly I know the answer, and it makes me miss Mum and Dad so much. I'm a bit of both, I say. I'm just going to pause there for just a minute, because it's pretty heavy going, what we're reading about here. Rashida, remember, hasn't got any parents either, so she's come along on her own. Omar has no parents, so the four of them together are a group of orphans looking out for each other, I guess, at this point. And it's just interesting that they come to realise that they're in a camp, they're in a detention centre. So they're in a what we would call they're in a detention centre, probably on an island called Nauru. And Nauru is an interesting thing. We're going to do a little bit more research on Nauru back at school. But Nauru is a small republic northwest of Fiji. It's quite a long way away from Australia, and the Australian government just made a deal with them, mainly because their economy was not looking great, and they earned millions and millions of dollars if they agreed to house people who have arrived on boats from war-torn areas to Australia. And there's more about that. We'll learn more about that later. Poor Bibi and poor Jamal. Can you imagine being in a tent of people where everybody's lost someone? So you're in a tent, you're in this big tent, and everybody's just howling. Can you imagine how harrowing that noise would be? It's pretty full on. Chapter 40. I'm Manchester United. I score a goal. Bibi, who's also Manchester United, gives me a big hug. Mum and Dad, who aren't Manchester United but are there anyway, give me a big hug too. Feels good. Then I wake up. It doesn't feel good anymore. It hurts a lot, and not just my hip. Bibi is shaking me. I blink and look around. The tent is full of people shouting and running. Jamal, yells Bibi, get up! My first thought is that someone has stepped on a landmine. Strange that. We've been on this island 3 days and nobody said anything about landmines. Perhaps they don't want to depress sad orphans. They don't know me very well. I've got a plan. 2 hours a day crying, the rest of the time being a productive and cheerful Australian citizen. It can't be a landmine. Can't be a landmine. Those shouts are excited, almost happy. Come on, yells Bibi. She drags me out of the tent. People are running down to the jetty. In the dawnlight, I see why. The warship is back, sitting in the harbour. I can make out the shape of the rubber boat bouncing across the grey water towards us. I turn to get back to bed. Then I have a thought. They must be bringing back the survivors. 3 teenage boys, Rashida said. Perhaps the teenagers spoke to Mum and Dad while the boat was sinking. Perhaps they've got a message for me and Bibi. Slowly, limping, I let Bibi lead me down to the jetty. People are climbing out of the rubber boat. Other people are laughing and crying. I must still be half asleep. I don't understand who all these people are. Then I see something that makes me think I'm not just half asleep, I'm still dreaming. Omar hugging a tearful family. A big, damp, crying, laughing family. He sees me and looks sheepish. This is the big family I was telling you about, he says. Then he goes back to hugging them. I stare. They're real, all right. Next to them, a man from our tent is talking to an Australian officer. Suddenly the man crumples into tears and slumps down onto the jetty. No, he sobs as the officer tries to help him up. I don't want to live, not without them. My insides start to hurt as I realise what is happening. News must have come back about the people on the other boat who drowned. Bibi grips my hand and screams, an ecstatic, joyful scream. I spin around. Mum and Dad are standing there. The warship didn't see us, says Mum. And then they did. Bibi flings herself at them. I can't move. I'm paralysed with relief and joy. It doesn't matter. They come to me. What a roller coaster. We lost them. We've got them back. Yay! Yay! Chapter 41. I didn't think I had any tears left inside me, but I do. They pour down my face and get all over Mum and Dad and Bibi, and I've never felt anything like it. We hold each other for so long that the sun's up when we finally stop for breath. When we can finally speak, we go to the tent and talk for ages. I get the bad news over first. This isn't Australia, I say quietly. It's an island in the Pacific Ocean. Mum and Dad don't seem that shocked. I get the feeling they already know. Mum puts her arm around us all. We're together, she says. You're safe. That's all I care about. She and Dad ask us about our sea journey. Oh, I am proud of you, son, says Dad when I tell him about scooping out the boat. Selfish camel snot, says Mum when Bibby tells her about the sailor who took the only bucket. Exactly, says Bibby. Then she frowns and looks around the tent. Some people are talking happily like us, but others are red-eyed and weeping. Rashida says, murmurs Bibby thoughtfully, that sometimes people are only camel snots because of what's happened to them. We introduce Mum and Dad to Omar and Rashida. Mum cries some more when I explain how Rashida's flower saved our lives, and she hugs Rashida for a long time. I saved his life too, says Omar. Dad hugs him for a long time. I can see Omar is getting a bit uncomfortable, so I change the subject. We've got some good news, I say to Mum and Dad. Bibby's really good at soccer. She's going to be a soccer star. Bibby glows. She punches me hard on the shoulder. So's Jamal, she says. Tell them the plan, Jammy. I stare at her. Jammy? A soccer star needs a nickname, says Bibby. Omar told me. I tell Mum and Dad our plan for the future of Afghanistan, about having soccer careers in Australia and helping form a new government at home so we can all go back safely. Mum and Dad look at each other and their eyes fill with tears again. I know how they feel. Happiness can do that. Chapter 42. Andrew is sitting in a small office in one of the peeling buildings. Hello, Jamal, he says. I am so happy for you. I take a deep breath and open my mouth to ask the question I've come to ask, but before I can, Andrew speaks again. I'm also very sorry, he says. I should have told you the truth about this place. I knew you thought it was Australia, but after what you'd been through, I couldn't bear to... He shrugs. I've never seen an Australian look so miserable. It's okay, I say. I understand. But there's something I don't understand. Why did you bring us here? I ask. Andrew looks even more miserable. The Australian government has changed its refugee policy, he says. That is, they've revised the procedures and protocols. That is, I watch him struggling to find the right words. I wish he could. The words he's used so far don't sound right for an Australian, not even one speaking my language. Look, there was an election in Australia, he says. The Australian government thought they'd get more votes by keeping you out. His voice goes even quieter and sadder than before. And they did. I try to understand what Andrew is saying. I think I'm getting the idea. I'm also getting a sick and anxious feeling in my tummy. Some Australians don't want us. My head is spinning. I'm just going to pause there for a second, and it's true. That's exactly what happened. It was the Howard government at the time, and they were going for re-election, and there had been an increase in people. There had been an increase in people smuggling from war-torn areas, and the government felt that if they could say to the Australian people, we will protect you, we will ensure that everyone is safe, that terrorist attacks aren't going to happen in Australia, we're going to keep people out who don't belong here, we will decide who comes to this country and the means with which they come, and that won them votes from people who thought that was really important, and they ended up winning the election. And what I find really surprising, or just not surprising, it's not the right word, but just kind of heartbreaking about all of that, is that so that some guys in suits in Canberra can have the job that they want to have, they're leaving people to languish in detention centres on a phosphate island in Nauru in the middle of nowhere, when all of those people think that Australians are beautiful and caring and supportive and generous and kind. And it's shaming. It's just really sad. It's just a really sad thing that happened to these people. Some Australians don't want us. My head is spinning. Andrew stands up and goes to a shelf and hands something to me. It's my soccer ball. I mended it for you, he says. I stare at the new patch on top of all the others. It's an Australian flag. Thank you, I say. So the soccer ball is symbolic, and the soccer ball represents hope, and it represents perseverance. So this soccer ball has been patched again and again and again. You remember, it's been patched by a bit of the taxi, and it's been patched by a whole bunch of other things which I can't remember just off the top of my head right now. And finally, after he scores the goal, the boat sinks, the ball pops. Andrew comes back, this naval officer, he comes back and he patches it up with an Australian flag. He is patching up this symbolic object of hope and perseverance with the Australian flag. And that gives us hope that maybe good things can happen, and maybe it's not just politicians making decisions so that they can get re-elected. Such good writing. Oh my God. All right, we'll keep going. Thank you, I say. I give him a look so he knows I don't just mean about the ball, so he knows I mean about everything. But I don't understand. Here's a man who's as kind as can be, from a country where people's hearts are bigger than warm loaves, and yet some people there don't want us? Why? Give it a try, says Andrew, nodding at the ball. Not really in the mood for ball tricks, but Andrew's looking so unhappy I do it to help him feel better. I drop the ball onto my foot and try to flip it to my knee. My hip explodes with pain. I scream and jerk my leg out. The ball smashes through the window. Oh, sorry, I gasp as I stagger against Andrew's desk. Andrew doesn't even look at the window. He looks at me, his face creased with worry. You poor kid, he says. You need medical attention, and you're not the only one. We haven't even got an X-ray machine. He sits down in his chair and puts his head in his hands. For a second I think it's about the window, but it's not. I hate what we're doing to you people, he says quietly. This isn't what I thought we'd be doing. And I hate being here, and I'm so sorry. I can see he's struggling to control his feelings. It's what he's been trained to do, but it's not working. Probably because he's been on duty for such long hours lately. A tear is rolling down his face. He blinks hard. I hobble around to his side of the desk and pat him on the arm. I'm glad you're here, I say. I know how he feels. It can be very sad and lonely being a long way from home and having a dream and finding it's going to be harder than you thought. Do you know the secret of soccer? I asked him. Andrew shakes his head. I tell him, never give up, I say, even when things are looking hopeless. For some reason, this makes Andrew blink even harder, so I put my arm round his shoulders. He looks up at me with a sad smile. I smile back and think of all the other Australians there must be who are like Andrew. Everything will be okay, I say to him. I know it will. I look out of the broken window. The sea is like a glistening desert in the morning sun. Down on the beach I can see Mum and Dad and Bibi walking together at the water's edge. Even though they're picking their way through plastic bags and rotting seaweed, they look so happy. My chest fills with love, and I feel so lucky. I know this isn't Australia, but it feels like Australia to me. That's it. We finished it. What a roller coaster. What a roller coaster. What an amazing ending. So good. Such good writing. My goodness gracious. And possibly one of the most symbolic moments in the whole thing. I look out of the broken window. Could be a broken system. The sea is like a glistening desert in the morning sun. So the morning can be a new beginning, and the sea is this glistening desert harking back to his homeland, and that he's got a new beginning through a broken, busted system. Extraordinary. Little does Jamal know, and the reality of this, and we'll talk about this more when we get back to school, but the reality is he's likely to be in this camp for years to come. Many families were kept in on Manus Island, on Nauru, for years, languishing there in detention, not able to leave the compound, so in detention centres, detained, guarded by guards. They were locked away, they were imprisoned, they were incarcerated with no charge, having committed no crime, because they were fleeing their war-torn countries, and they tried to do it by being smuggled out on boats. Not because they thought, oh, I'm going to maliciously try and go to another country. I'm going to go to Australia and try and wreck the place, and it's going to be great. I'm going to take over, and it's going to be the end. Or I might have a terrorist attack or whatever. The information that they had, the routes that they had, the opportunity to get on a list, to get a visa, to get out, to show their refugee status. There's millions of them. How are they going to be able to get out? They'll sell everything they can to leave because they're going to get killed. They have imminent risk of being killed, and their family is about to be killed. Their house was blown up. And so they flee and they leave and they go somewhere else, and they will spend years in that tent city in Nauru. No education, no jobs, no hope for the future, no end in sight. And that was an Australian government policy. That was a policy made by the Australian government, and the Australian people didn't step up and demand, you will lose your jobs. We will vote you out if you continue to treat people this way. There was a lot of fear, and a lot of people felt that it was right what was happening to them. Or they didn't even know. They didn't even know, didn't pay attention, couldn't have cared less, because it wasn't about them. It wasn't about them or their families. It's about some random family from another country who doesn't even speak our language and is a pain in the neck. Different language, different religion, different customs, different ideas. Very different. Don't want them here. And it's such a blisteringly awful way to think about humans. Just human beings who just want to live their lives, and they can't in their own country, and they were not welcome here. Refugee policy has changed. When another government came in, they changed their refugee policy, and then another government got in after them, and they reinstated a very similar policy, and they stopped the boats. We're going to talk more about it when we get back to school. The topic isn't as hot at the moment because we're in a pandemic, and a bunch of other stuff is going on. We had fires and all of that, and it's a little bit different, but it's a very, very interesting part of the book. Oh, it's gone for 38 minutes. Thank you so much for persevering and listening and following through with this one. We have finished the book. Hooray, hurrah. We've done so well to be able to finish the book. Yeah, we'll talk about it more when we get back to school. We do have some assessment tasks that we're going to be working through. One of them is going to be your essay that you should have been taking notes for and thinking about how you're going to answer it. But we're going to do all of that back at school when I see you again after the holidays. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.